My experience is in deregistration. It's too tedious for no apparent reason. Now, I know a couple of people who've done that in 2020. Things just got really tough and they just wound it down. What is the process? Because we really talk about, registering and setting up, but we never talk about, sort of winding it down. Maybe we can begin with you and then we'll get to you, Renee, Ribin, on, so we want to wind it up. What do we do then?
So the process of winding up is a very critical element because, as we said, once you've set up this entity, it's a separate legal entity which is in existence. And why this process seems sometimes to be cumbersome is because there are a number of checks that have to be done. Because once you've set up a business, it then has engaged into relationships, financial relationships with people in the market. You have creditors, you have suppliers, you have employees, and all that. So for you to be allowed to deregister, there has to be a check to ensure the commercial and financial relationships with all these people, or you have KRA, you have all these people, has been properly wound up for it to be deregistered. So if you've started doing business and you're engaging in all that, there are procedures under the Insolvency Act under which you have to go through to be able to deregister. And this actually involves, if you've been carrying out business, having a receiver, a liquidator appointed. But again, this process, appointing these people should not be an expensive affair. Just talk to the liquidators around. And if you're not able to engage those ones, the Office of the Official Receiver actually has receivers who can be engaged for that process.
And for that, you still go to the BRS, the Business Registration Service, to begin the process of winding up or deregistering a company?
No, for that one now, it's with the Office of the Official Receiver, who is also sits at the Attorney General's office. So that one is also a process which goes through that. However, if you haven't engaged in any business, if you haven't taken up any assets or liabilities and all that, there's a process under the Companies Act which allows you to apply to the Registrar of Companies for the company to be struck out. But once again, there has to be those checks which has to be confirmed. You haven't taken assets or liabilities. You do not have employment obligations.
In other words, you don't owe people money. You don't have workers who you've not paid, and you're trying to wind up the company.
Exactly. So, and for those ones, the registrar actually will also publish in the Gazette that this person has made this application to deregister. If anyone has any complaint, to give this. If after 3 months there's no complaint, to be deregistered. But if people come up, then it has to go through the entire process. So the main one, if you've carried out a business, there has to be an orderly winding up under the Insolvency Act, and then now it's struck out. If there's no business which has been carried out, there's a simplified process which can go through striking out through the registrar's office. But the key issue is that while it appears complex, it's a prudent step to ensure that people don't just set up businesses and wind up and leave these key stakeholders hanging without any result which they can go to.
Absolutely. Let's take a couple of other questions from our viewers. There is one. Please give us tips on how to go about registering a company limited by guarantee. Oh, there we go, guarantee. Okay, and how much money is needed to apply for a business license? And then, apologies for the spelling error there. Then there's the formalizing process should have the IP issues mainstreamed into the process of registration. This is a concern for most startups in the tech space. Renee, I think you can speak to some of those concerns and answer maybe some of the questions.
Okay. Let me just take a step back at something that you'd said that I thought, oh, I don't want to leave that just like that. So, KRA, this is your opportunity to be kind to me because I'm about to be very kind to you. 5% withholding tax is not the end of the tax. Okay.
And that's important to state. Yes, thank you for taking us there.
Yes, I really want to underscore that because the taxman will knock on your door and will remind you that you may owe him anything up to another 25%.
Don't I know it? Which is, just explain to people, so 5% is what they deduct?
It's the withholding tax by the company or the corporation that has hired you for the gig, for example, or for the service that you are rendering. And the 25%, how do you're supposed to account for that? Just tell us about that. So I am not going to pretend to be a tax expert here, and so you must seek tax advice on this. But remember that you do have a personal liability insofar as your taxes are concerned, for every earning that you make. And remember also, like Ribin said, you've got to, your company, if it's going through a company, will also have its tax liability. So the withholding tax is an amount that is deducted from the total amount of tax that you are owing for that transaction. Okay, and then let me just throw it in because we've now run this, we run a series of talks with KRA so that we can understand taxes, so it becomes less taxing to understand what it is that we're looking to. There's now been the introduction of the digital services tax. And understanding for whom it works and who is required to pay it is very important. And also that it is part of, or it sits almost like withholding tax. Maybe that's not such a good example, but it sits within the totality of the tax regime of everything that you are liable for.
Right.
So that paying your DST, for example, will not exempt you from the full scale of the liability. Right. So I just wanted to correct that, because it's it's something that comes up, and then of course
I've experienced that.
You've had that little experience with tax.
Yeah, it wasn't pretty, but
it is. It's invigorating to the spirit,
to say the least,
and warming to the faculties.
Yes.
So a little bit, and I think I want to speak a little bit to the intellectual or industrial property questions.
For tech startups.
Yes, for tech startups and for companies generally.
Okay.
At the point at which you're starting your business, you've got your fancy name and you've started off and it says, and you've got your logo and all the rest of it. And you don't think to protect it because you're right at the start, you know, going through the KIPI, which is the Kenyan Industrial Property Institute, and all of the things that are required there is another capital cost. And we've got to remember, especially if you're starting a business because you've been laid off, that you've got a very limited, finite amount of money, and you may not think to protect your intellectual property, whether it is tech startups or right the way to. I'll give you a quick example, if I may. A client who has allowed me to give this example, who started a body and beauty care company.
Okay.
Has worked her way into creating that name into a brand name.
All right.
And then the other day was sent a little package of cream, of beauty cream, with her name's, the company's name on it, but with an A instead of an O, and a photo of a lady who had such a striking resemblance to her that it seemed like this was her product. Having gone through a little bit of investigation, it was, of course, from the Kariobangi light industries, if we can use that term like very generously, and is now working backwards to try and secure her intellectual property on whom another third party is sailing on. It is so vital, even if you start off just at logo and copywriting, which is just the simplest form. And this is me sort of putting on my lawyer hat for 2 seconds, and I'll take it off and give it back to Ruben in a short while. To service mark protection, the trademark protections, understanding that there is a time period between the application and the registration thereof, but at least you are in the pipeline. Protect yourself early, rather than the regret of having to go in for a process that is involving a dispute, or you've got to go before a tribunal. I think there was another question also, which was about registration of...
Yes, and maybe we can put them up again as well, just so we can get those as we go along. It was about registration of... registering a company limited by guarantee.
Right. Do you want to take this? Because there's two different ones. Two different positions. Go on.
So pretty much for companies, there's a company limited by shares and companies limited by guarantee.
What does that mean?
So for company limited by shares, this is a company which essentially you put in share capital, then you're given shares.
Okay.
But for company limited by guarantee, it's a company which you actually guarantee that in the event of liquidation, this is the amount which I'll give in.
Okay.
So now, in the general operation of things, when you're doing a business, mostly you do with a company limited by shares. Companies limited by guarantee usually used for charitable activities. That's what usually happens.
I see.
But now I know why that question is coming, because now for a company limited by guarantee, because of its charitable activities, it has to be vetted at the NIS. So more or less, that's the only difference between this company limited by shares and company limited by guarantee. That's why now you find the vetting sometimes takes a little longer.
Okay.
But the business registration service is streamlining these services to ensure that that process takes a bit of a short period of time. And maybe to just put a tip there to ensure, because most people don't take the information they put in the application seriously, put the correct numbers for the directors and the shareholders, because when the NIS people will be vetting, they'll actually call those numbers. If no one picks, the application will be skipped and you'll start complaining that it has taken forever. So that would be the tip. But the only difference between the two is that this other one will go for vetting, and this process historically has taken a bit longer, but that process has been streamlined for it to take much shorter right now. So when you're doing a company limited by guarantee, it's mostly for charitable activities. Expect it will take a little bit longer than this other one, because the private one can even go very few days.
Let's talk about the beneficial ownership.
Yes.
There's also a question about that. We've seen that. We've covered it here in the news. So talk to us about what that requirement is, about stating that, when you're setting up the company, or even for those who'd already set up, are required to update this information, the premise of that, and what it's all about, and why this is important to make sure that you're in line with.
Yeah, so basically, the country right now, we have a requirement for companies to declare beneficial owners in the company. Where this requirement is coming from, you see, Kenya is part of the global financial system, and there's a global financial push to ensure transparency in the global financial system, so as to weed out issues of corruption, money laundering, financing terrorism, and all that. That's also part in a push in ensuring that Nairobi and Kenya is continuing to be that key player in the financial system. So to be able to meet those standards, Kenya also now brought in that requirement that for companies there has to be a declaration of beneficial ownership. Now, what is beneficial ownership? Beneficial ownership, these are the people behind the registered people, because when you go to a registered, actually, let me just step back. So in terms of ownership, there are two forms. There's legal ownership and there's beneficial ownership. So legal ownership will be that ownership that is appearing on the record. Like for a shareholder.
Like a proxy.
The beneficial, yes, actually in that context, it would be like that one. Like now for a shareholder.
So the face of the company.
Yes, for a shareholder, the legal owner will be that person. If right now we carry out an official search, will be appearing there as a shareholder. So this person can be both legal and beneficial if there's no one behind them. But if they're holding these shares on behalf of someone who's not appearing there, then the person appearing there is the legal owner, and the person behind the scenes is the beneficial owner. So now this requirement requires you to disclose if there are beneficial owners behind who is appearing. You have to disclose those ones, and the reason for that is that one, to ensure transparency in the marketplace, because these structures are now being used not in all cases. Sometimes they're used for proper commercial consideration, but in a number of cases they've been used to advance money laundering, financing terror, and all this other aspect. So Kenya has done this to be among the league of countries that are putting transparency in all that to ensure we continue to hold our place in the global financial marketplace.
Okay, thank you for that. I have 1 minute to go. Renee, I want to give you, I have two. So I have 1 minute for you and then 1 minute for Ribbon. Even as you talk about why we need to sort of learn about all of these things, and you've talked importantly about an ecosystem as well, just creating that around you, and why these the classes that you're providing are so important and how beneficial they are.
There's two ways of learning something. One is getting the education. The other one is learning by experience. Both have a cost. One is a lot more costly in terms of time and correcting. Okay, like I said, a lot of the information you can get from just about anywhere. Putting yourself in an ecosystem that helps you that holds you accountable for the things that you said that you're going to do, that understands your business, that also puts you in a system within which you have other business owners, and therefore you can learn from one another in peer mentorship, but also grow one another within the synergies of the businesses that you have together, or the synergy of the businesses that you can grow in cooperation, particularly, and is not just vital for a business owner. Anyone will tell you that running a business is very, very lonely. It's not just lonely from the point of view that you need to know all the answers. It's also from just where do you find all of this information from. And let me say this, because we've talked a lot about formalization, and there will be those who are watching right now and just thinking, oh, hell no. Am I allowed to say hell? I'm not very sure. Here's the thing. When you cannot grow beyond a certain size unless you are formalized. The bank will only lend you to several sort of multiples of the limit of your own personal account, but they will be more open to a legal entity. You are able to unlock more finances when you're registered than when you are not. How do we know this? Our Juakalis would continue to be Juakalis and be very well functioning, highly performing businesses registered than they are unregistered. If they could have already, they would have, okay, because those are very hardworking men and women.
Absolutely.
The other thing about formalization is that it creates that legal barrier between you
and the business.
And where you are looking to grow the business, that is important because the person who comes into the business either as an investor or as a partner does not necessarily want to be related to your own personal finances. And so you do need to create that so that there is an opportunity for partnership. Speaking of partnership, it's vital that you understand who you want to be in partnership with. For a minute, and gentlemen, I am talking to you even as I speak to women.
Yes.
I've got your back.
You've got like 30 seconds to go.
Understand who you are, understand what your weaknesses are, and understand what your business needs before you invite your partner, your spouse, your mother, your father, your brother, your cousin, your BFF, who you're really good friends with, into your business. They will tank your business, and it will be your fault because you did not understand these aspects of yourself. Absolutely. It is very difficult to self-evaluate. The course that we give, the support that we offer, even after the course is over, is to enable you to have someone to hold a mirror to you and ask, really? You want to start doing the accounts and you are great at marketing? Who's going to be doing the marketing in the meantime?
Okay.
And that's why you should have that ecosystem.
Great. Ribbon?
Just for me to close, I'll go back to that issue of the people who you work with as your strategic partners. Like the regulator right now, the Business Registration Service, they are doing an amazing job, of course, led by the Director General, Kenneth Kadhuma, and the Registrar, Joyce. They're really committed. They're not just there to knock your heads when you haven't met a step, but they're there to support you to meet the requirements and to go. That same thing with us professionals, the lawyers, the accountants, the company secretary. There's a shift in the market right now. The regulators and stakeholders are there to hold your hand as a business person to understand your strategy and to walk you through that, because it's only when we do that that we can be able to run proper businesses that will add value to this country.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. Do we have time for some feedback? I believe there's a little bit more as we go. As we wind up, the hashtag is Business Now. This is from Invest in Africa, saying inclusive business models must be deliberate on making both men and women win in business by reducing or removing the barriers of entry. Jay Kubasu says approximately 30% of incorporated and or registered businesses make it launching and selling of products and services. 70% are kept on the shelves and briefcases for storytelling. Oh my. Ariel Boucher says just go to eCitizen and fill in the documents and you are done. Not a big deal, actually. Well, maybe not. And that's the importance of the show today, to just tell you about you can easily go to eCitizen, but what happens thereafter is some of the issues. And I think those are some of the things we talked about. Do you know what sort of company you want to form based on your strategy, your products, your services? Make sure you get it right. Thank you so much for watching the show today. As always, we really value your feedback, so keep it coming. We will see you again next week. Good afternoon.